Welcome to the Richard Dolan Show, airing live Monday nights on kgraradio.com and now as a podcast on iTunes and wherever else you can find it. You can learn more at my member site, richarddolanmembers.com. Now, join me for a fascinating exploration of all the things you secretly want to talk about, from UFOs to government shenanigans, strange science, future tech, and more. On KGRA Radio, welcome to the Richard Dolan Show, where every week we fight the good fight. It's March 26, 2018. Welcome. Very nice to have you here with me. I'm excited. Later in this program, in about a half hour, I'll be interviewing someone. I don't often do interviews, but I think it's about time that I start looking at some interesting interviews with interesting people. And I don't know how regular a feature this will be, but I think, let's face it, radio can be interesting and engaging when you've got a good conversation taking place. And I think I'll have a very good one tonight with a gentleman named Randall Nickerson. I met Randall about 5 years ago, and this is a very interesting man on a very interesting mission. You'll hear a lot more about it in a half hour, but in short, he is the producer and director of a documentary known as Ariel Phenomenon. It's Ariel, A-R-I-E-L, Phenomenon. And Ariel happens to be the name of a school in the nation of Zimbabwe, in a town known as Rua, where in 1994 was, without a doubt, one of the most interesting and powerful UFO events in modern history. And it involved about 60 school children. And there's some very, very powerful video testimony of that. But Randall is doing a comprehensive documentary on that, and you will hear a lot more about that case and about his journey to create this fascinating documentary. So that'll be a little later. Really looking forward to that. So you've got me alone for the next half hour, and a few things that are on my mind. I guess the first thing that I will mention to you is that I believe I was able to keep my promise from last week. And last week I said to you that I believe that program, that show, would be the first that would make it to iTunes under kind of a new system that I'm developing. And indeed, that recording of the Richard Dolan Show is now available on iTunes. It was my very first iTunes upload. It was approved a couple of days ago, and it's there, so you could search out the Richard Dolan Show on iTunes if you are up for downloads or remote listening in that way. And that's going to be a regular feature. And the other thing, I guess, that I need to mention is that although it's not 100% ready, in my opinion, my member site is ready enough that you could probably take a look at it, and in fact, you could even join it if you wanted to. It's richarddolanmembers.com. I've been working on this quite a bit over the past, actually, several months. I'm not really that good at website creation, I've discovered, but I've had help from two people in particular. Micah Hanks has to take front row center accolades for all of the help he's done to get this member site looking halfway decent and reasonable and functional. And Micah, if you're listening, you know my feelings about this and how indebted to you I am. I'm very, very grateful for all of your help. He's been incredible. And then the other person who's been unbelievably helpful is my fiance, Tracy Garbutt, who, thank goodness, someone who's got a really good sense of graphic placement and also content. She's been an invaluable help for me to get this already. So between Micah and Tracy, a Richard Dolan member site is actually up right now. Doesn't look totally bad. There's a few segments that need information to be put in there. But let me just tell you what my plan for that is. This has been something that I've been really wanting to do for quite a while. So regular audio, regular video, and written pieces. So regular audio podcasts in addition to the Richard Dolan Show. All of the Richard Dolan Show episodes will be stored on that member site as well. That's free to the public. Anyone can just listen to those. Video, I'll be creating members audio and video specifically for members. And here's the thing, and the reason that I was even prompted to do this. Throughout any given day, I have about 5 to 10 off-the-cuff moments where if you're with me in the house, and Tracy can speak to this, I will go off on one topic or another. Now, this isn't a Grandpa Simpson rant, hopefully, but they are ideas that come to me that don't always find their way into written pieces, but that are interesting nonetheless. So there's a lot of just me that's going to be on this member site that I think will be interesting, and it'll cover all of the subjects that I love to cover, whether it has to do with UFOs or ufology, geopolitics, false flags, philosophy, and personal philosophy. I mean, all of that's really going to find its way in there. But it's not simply off-the-cuff types of comments. There's already I've created a fair number of formal articles and video presentations that are going up on this site that I think will be adding a great deal of value. What I've been finding in the last couple of weeks in creating some of this content is that it takes work, but it's absolutely worth it. So if you're interested in the stuff that I'm into, if you're interested in my ideas about life in general or UFOs or politics or any of the above or any other combination, then this, I think, might be something that's of interest to you. And then the other thing that's going to be a significant part of this website are regular live stream video AMA, Ask Me Anything style chats that I'll be having with members at least once a month, where I'll be sitting down and talking to you live on video for members on the subjects that are of interest at the time. So, in fact, what's funny is I did a test of a live video stream just a couple of days ago with Micah, and Tracy was in the room with me. And this was kind of crazy because I'm testing this all out for the first time, seeing how it works, and it seemed to work pretty well with one problem. Without realizing it, I was live streaming to the entire world for about 90 minutes. And about 200 plus people were listening at one point or another to, and it was nothing interesting. I was simply talking about getting the live stream up and running and how's it looking, Micah, and this type of stuff. None other than Gary McKinnon of the UK, one of the most famous, I hesitate to call him a hacker, but one of the most famous individuals who acquired UFO data from the Pentagon through means that the Pentagon said were illegal. Gary McKinnon was a cause celeb for many, many years, and the U.S. wanted to extradite him and send him off to Guantanamo Bay for gaining UFO information about a secret space program. And I think actually what he got was entirely legit and true because the U.S. government really wanted Gary McKinnon for a long time. Anyway, Gary McKinnon was watching my live stream, our live stream, and wrote to me, sent me a couple of emails, which I finally saw. And on the live stream, you people could hear me say, "Oh my God, it's Gary McKinnon." So I was able to kill the live stream shortly after that. And Gary, if you're listening, I thank you very much for helping me out there. So anyway, that's a long way of describing that I'll be having live video AMA. I think we got that whole system worked out. So that'll be the Richard Dolan members site. And as I say, it's available now if you're interested in signing up. In the next day or two, I'm actually adding in a fresh podcast, a couple of fresh articles. That site is up and running. Also a news feed. I think it'll take a little while before that site really gets the feel that it will ultimately get, but I'm excited about it, and I can tell you there will be a lot of content in there moving forward. So that's that. Richard Dolan members, do check it out. One of the things that will be on that site, once it's up and fully ready, will be a complete calendar of my activities. And let me just have a moment to describe that for you. I've got a few things that I'll be doing in the next couple of months. First, next month, in actually 2.5 weeks, will be the Ozark UFO Conference. Is it Ozark UFO Festival race? What is that? Ozark UFO Conference. I've only done it a few times.
Conference, yeah. Ozark UFO Conference.
I've only done it like 6 or 7 times. This is April 13th to the 15th in Northwest Arkansas, the beautiful town of Eureka Springs. And it is a beautiful, beautiful place. They call it God's country for a reason. It's just gorgeous. And the conference itself is one of the best, in my opinion, in the UFO field. Certainly in the eastern half of the U.S., it's a really great one. Usually 300, 400, 500 attendees. It varies from year to year. And every year they've got a good lineup, in my opinion. This year is no different. I'm fortunate to be there, and I will be presenting. And you can meet Tracy and myself and Race and the KGRA gang and lots of other folks. April 13th to 15th. Go to ozarkufoconference.com. I think that's it.
That's correct.
Very quickly after that, we will be in Australia from early through the later part of May. I'm going to be with Tracy in Australia with Catherine Austin Fitz in central Australia, the town of Uluru near Ayers Rock. And I've never been to Central Australia. It looks like to be an amazing experience. Catherine, who was a former Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under George Bush Sr., is one of the good people on this planet, and like all good insiders, has gone a bit rogue, gone a bit off-road from the establishment, and she has organized a conference at which I will be speaking, Central Australia. After that, I'll be in Sydney on May 19th, and if you're in Australia, if you are listening, I don't know how you're going to find out about this. Well, you can go to my website, and I'll have a link to that soon. Go to richarddolanmembers.com, and there will be a link for the Sydney event. If you are Australian and you are there, go see it. I'll be happy to meet you. June 23rd, I'll be in Toronto for the Alien Cosmic Expo. This is something that they've had going for a couple of years now. It's run by a great Canadian named Stu Bundy. And then a week after that, Tracy and I will be in Vancouver for the Architects of the New Paradigm Conference run by Jordan Pease, June 30th. All of these are linked at richarddolanmembers.com. Go to events and you will see all about it. I'm looking forward to it. So I've got a little bit of time before I bring Randall Nickerson on. And one of the interesting things that I continually think about is the repercussions of the current UFO news that's out there, the big news that To the Stars Academy initiated by Tom DeLonge have been making a lot of waves over these videos that have been released. Now, there's 3 of them released up till now. Most recently, the video, I think it's called the Go Fast video. I think that's what people are calling it. One of the folks in To the Stars is Christopher Mellon, former CIA, and he was interviewed recently on Fox by Tucker Carlson. It's on YouTube, and it's about 5 minutes or so. Tucker Carlson is interesting with UFOs. He's one of these few mainstream announcers who it's very obvious, you can see it in his interviews, that he takes this subject very seriously. And considering that this is Fox mainstream U.S. news, goes about as far as I've ever seen any mainstream analyst or mainstream newscaster go in terms of the subject of UFOs. It's really quite extraordinary. And this interview with Christopher Mellon, I think, is quite noteworthy. They're going back and forth talking about very openly how military pilots have seen extraordinary things and taken video of these extraordinary things. And in fact, Mellon said it's even more than this. He said, we This is Christopher Mellon on Fox News. He said, "We have our finest military personnel and sensors corroborating information." Now, this is stuff that I've been saying for years and years, but not on national news stations like Fox or NBC or any of these other places where you have millions of listeners. So you're talking corroboration, basically electronic plus visual confirmation of these objects. In the history of UFO research, when you get double confirmation like that, it always counts for a great deal. They call it radar visual or electronic visual. And that's what Mellon here was talking about. He said, now the thing is, if those systems, those electronic systems are malfunctioning, that would still be of major importance, because these are types of equipment that the nation uses to defend itself. So they're not supposed to malfunction, and you've got those types of equipment corroborating what human pilots are observing visually. And then the other thing that Mellon pointed out or stated that I thought was kind of important was that one of the videos that came to the Pentagon from a commander of a carrier battle group, he said was a plea for help. Now, this was Mellon's word on it, a plea for help. When you really think about that, U.S. military making a plea for help relating to UFOs. And again, I simply want to point out that this is an old theme in the history of UFO research. This goes back to the 1940s and 50s, where researchers back then, like Donald Kehoe, retired Marine Corps major, who was very well connected within the Navy and in other parts of the military, Kehoe got a number of individuals who stated to him point blank that we were losing aircraft in attempts to intercept UFOs, and that this was indeed a very serious problem that the U.S. military back then did not know how to handle. So Mellon essentially here in 2018 is saying the same thing as what researchers were getting 70 years ago. And a couple of other things I just want to point out. The assumption that Mellon and I think Tucker Carlson were saying is that these objects presumably are not American. I think that's probably true, and they're not presumably Russian or Chinese. These seem to be beyond any of the technologies that's currently possible, and I think that seems to be a general consensus. And then here's something that I found a little difficult to swallow, but I understand it from mainstream news. Carlson asked Mellon, is there any working theory as to who these objects belong to? If they don't belong to us, are they Russian? Are they Chinese? Is there any? And Mellon said, no, we have no working theory. Now, there I draw the line. I don't believe that. I think they absolutely have a working theory, and I think that working theory is that there's a civilization that does not belong to Earth, or a civilization that is as yet unacknowledged, that is operating in the airspace over sensitive U.S. military installations. And by extension, look, this is not simply a U.S. problem. I mean, the news is covering this as solely a U.S. situation, but it isn't. It's Russian, it's Chinese, it's British, it's all over Africa, it's Asian, it's South American, it's Canadian, it's Mexican. Every region on this planet has multiple examples of extraordinary objects with extraordinary capabilities and maneuverability violating sensitive airspace that's not supposed to be violated. So this is not simply an American thing. Anyway, Mellon says there's no working theory who they belong to, and on that I'm calling BS. I just don't believe that. But he did state, correctly I would say, that these objects possess immense strategic importance, because he mentioned explicitly in the interview that some got within striking distance of the national capital in Washington, D.C. And in fact, yes, we know of cases, the famous case from 2002, July of 2002, in which F-16 interceptors were seen by the public attempting to intercept objects, plural, multiple, over sensitive, or near, I should say, sensitive airspace near the nation's capital. And that was a case. I personally interviewed a couple of those witnesses, and it made national news. It was very interesting. Mellon was bringing that up, that some of these objects, and I don't know when he's talking about, but they were within striking distance of Washington. So, look, this is important. He's stating it for a national audience. And then the other thing he stated that was important or interesting in the interview, it was only a 5-minute interview, was that he felt that U.S. agencies were not sufficiently coordinating their response to this phenomenon. He said, just like before 9/11, we had agencies that weren't collecting intelligence and sharing with each other, or that weren't sharing intelligence with each other. And he says that's what it's like now. We're not dealing with this with a unified response. And again, we're forced to take him at his word on this. I don't really know that that is true. In fact, my governing assumption is that that's probably not true, that at deeply classified levels, there is indeed a unified response of some sort to this phenomenon. Now, what is that unified response? Is that what I would call a breakaway civilization? Yeah, probably it is. That there is a beyond black budget agency operating within the U.S. and beyond the U.S. as well. I'm assuming, but I don't know, but I think that is charged with dealing with this phenomenon, and that this response, being of prime importance, is more important even than the agendas of any single national government on planet Earth. And therefore, I would argue it is necessary for those agencies to be beyond formal government control. And I think this is what would allow someone like Christopher Mellon to state that there is no sufficient coordination and collaboration among the services, because I think, quite frankly, most of those services don't themselves have a need to know relating to the UFO phenomenon. I think the UFO phenomenon goes beyond the pay grade of even most of the highest generals and admirals in the U.S. military. And I think a few, probably only a few, are actually read in. And the last thing I'm going to say before I hit break here is I will restate a conversation that I had with a very prominent individual who was associated with the CIA and had a number of extremely prominent elite, I would say, connections within U.S. government. And, you know, this is a man who just said to me that in his retirement, he had conversations with 18 former U.S. presidents, secretaries of defense, CIA directors, and deputy directors of defense. So 18 individuals of the highest level of the American pyramid of power, right? You would think if anyone's read into the UFO program, it would be these types of people. And yet this man stated of those 18, and he talked with all of them one-on-one about UFOs, and he just said of the 18, 2 or 3, those are his exact words, said, UFOs, that's nonsense. Don't waste your time with such stupid garbage as that. 3 or 4 said, oh, yes, very important. I was briefed on it. And I got the idea that they shared a little bit of information. And then he said the vast majority, we're talking more than 12, maybe 13, maybe 14, said, oh, yes, UFOs. I'm very interested. Never got a briefing, wanted a briefing. I was just never in with the in crowd. And I said, well, let me just get this straight. So you're telling me of these top-level individuals in the American national security apparatus, only maybe 3 or 4 received a briefing? He says, yes, that's right. And we concluded, he and I together, that this implied a behind-the-scenes agency, something related to the Bilderbergers or something out of, who knows, a Trilateral Commission or the Bohemian Grove crowd. In other words, the crowd of people that go to these elite gatherings that are formal but informal, that have power but no power, but that actually have all the power in the world. It's where those people in the know meet and talk and discuss, and they are the ones who sit behind governments and They're the kingmakers. And in his opinion, and I think in my opinion, that's where the real power is. So you're not going to find it within the formal command structure of the United States Defense Department. I just think we're not. And so this doesn't mean that what Christopher Mellon says isn't important. It's very important. And it could very well be true that the formal U.S. command structure is grossly unprepared. It could be grossly unprepared for this challenge of these extraordinary objects. But it doesn't mean that some other agency, black agency, dark agency, secret agency is not prepared. They are prepared. Okay, those are my thoughts on that matter. It's fascinating. We're in a very, very interesting time, my friends, for the UFO subject. When I come back, I will be with Randall Nickerson. I'm really looking forward to this. This is going to be all about one of the most powerful, fascinating UFO events ever. That is the 1994 Ruwa, Zimbabwe UFO incident. I will have Randall Nickerson here to talk all about it. I'm Richard Dolan. This is The Richard Dolan Show on KGRA. We'll be right back. Stick around. I'm really excited to have this next guest for a chat with everyone here, with you here, and that's Randall Nickerson. And I just want to do a quick little introduction about what is significant about what he's doing. Randall is putting together a documentary on one of the most interesting, engaging UFO cases, really of all time, and certainly of the last several decades, and that's the 1994 Ruwa, Zimbabwe case, which took place at a school known as Ariel School, with about 60 children on recess who saw, well, something quite extraordinary, which we'll get into. But the thing about this is that it's one of the most powerful events in our era, in the sense of there's video interviews of these kids. They're all 7, 8, 9 years of age, and you can see it on YouTube, and it's just powerful. And it's impossible to look at the video of these kids and not feel emotionally affected, because they're just it's just so sincere, and they're so articulate, and so these are really good kids. And the thing about it is that they've all grown up into adulthood, and Randall has interviewed many of these individuals now to revisit that amazing event. So I'm really happy to bring to you Randall Nickerson, the producer and director of Ariel Phenomenon. Randall, thanks so much for being on the Richard Dolan Show.
Well, thank you, Richard. I appreciate it, and appreciate you taking the time. Yep, it's definitely. Go ahead.
Well, it's just my pleasure, and I wonder if you would mind giving people a sense of that fascinating day in 1994, which started your journey into digging into this case and to creating the documentary that you created.
Sure. Well, it happened in the morning break time at the Ariel School. It's in Zimbabwe. It's a country neighboring South Africa. Beautiful country. And this was a primary school. At break time, I guess the first thing that happened broadly amongst the children on the playground was seeing some kind of silver light in the sky. And this whole event went on for about 15 minutes. And then people were reporting, the kids were reporting that they were seeing flashes of light. Mm-hmm. And then toward the rear side of the school, out toward the playing field, actually it was on the cross-country course, they saw something hovering out there, silver shiny object, which they later drew and sketched, and which was essentially an oval metallic shape. And they were quite curious at that point from everybody I talked to and all the archival footage I've been able to retrieve. And as they all sort of gathered down toward, the children all sort of gathered down toward the playground to observe this and see what it was.
So at this point, was the object, has it landed, or was it still an aerial object?
It was, from the reports, it was hovering about 3 feet off the ground or above the ground in this particular area where there was a stone.
So they watched it when it was somewhat higher up in the sky, is what I'm understanding, and then they actually watched it descend. It actually sort of, from everyone I've spoke with, it was moving quite quickly. It didn't descend slowly or anything. It just moved into position very fast. Gotcha.
And then they saw a couple of figures emerge from this silver object, and they were wearing black. And one stayed around the craft itself, and the other ones approached the playground where they were. It gets very detailed, even in that. Once you start talking about those things, creatures, whatever you want to call them, there was a lot of actual weird strangeness as far as time. That we can go into it later.
I'm very interested in exploring this, but the impression that I'm getting is that there were 3 beings that were visible, or like one, I think, as I recall, was seen actually on the craft or above the craft, but I think on the craft.
That's
right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
and
correct.
Then there were 2 others.
Well,
that right?
It's still a little bit of a question mark. I mean, it depends on who was the witness, where they were positioned, because some of the kids were not positioned at that particular point where most of them had gathered. But some of the primary witnesses said there were 4, and I've heard that over and over from younger witnesses who were never interviewed at the time. But I got to say, the majority reported 2. Yeah, one being on the craft, on top of the craft, and then the other one approaching them. Yeah,
I see.
Yeah.
So let's continue this. So the craft has landed, apparently, where it's hovering very low. One being stays behind. One being approaches these children. And how was their reaction? Did they just go into extreme panic? I don't know what I would have done at that age. They're all 7, 8, 9 years of age, I'm thinking.
Yeah, they were between 7 and 12.
12, okay.
There was a couple of 13-year-olds there too. Yeah. Well, here's a thing that a lot of them talk about. Like, they would be looking at it, and it would be there and then disappear and then reappear. The creatures, these beings themselves. So they spent a good deal of time, from what I understand, just trying to see what they were seeing and believe what they were seeing. You know what I mean? It was not something they were expecting to see, and it wasn't 100% clear all the time.
It's incredibly disorienting, even for a grown adult, let alone someone who's a child, to have to be able to deal with that, I would think.
Yeah, I've seen that with a lot of these kids, now adults, how it has impacted them as adults differently.
Oh, exactly. So what else happened? So there's a being that's approaching the children, and from what I know, there are a small number of kids who actually got to be very close, physically close, to this being.
That's true.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I would say, there was a large group, but there were several, I would say probably 6 or 7 that were closer in proximity, I think, to this creature. And or more, there was more than one. So Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So what was this interaction like? I mean, what was it like when you must have interviewed some of these kids who were the ones who were very close to the one being? What did they describe that encounter as like?
I think, well, it depends on age. I mean, there were definitely children that were terrified. And a lot of the kids that had eye contact with this creature, were reported like when they had eye contact with this creature with big black eyes and a large head, that it was like time had stopped, like they were in some kind of zone, outside of time in a way, and everything went quiet. So there were definitely, I'd say the majority were terrified, and and there was also a large amount of them that were curious, fascinated, and also drawn in by this creature's eyes.
Yeah, and this is something
during that.
Well, we hear this in the literature and research all the time. Not just this particular case. I mean, it's ubiquitous almost when people have encounters with these beings with the large black eyes. It's hypnotic. You hear this again and again. So we're getting it with these children as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of details. When I started researching the whole entire subject, I was really surprised how many details these kids were repeating that didn't have access to that knowledge. They just didn't have. There's a lot of details in people's encounters, experiences that are just not talked about in any detail in the media. And I noticed that when I first started, getting the archival, which is, what convinced me more than anything was, seeing these kids interviewed right after the event. And
without
weeks after the.
Oh, well, I feel bad interrupting you, but without giving away too many details, because you've created a documentary that you're still in the process of wrapping up getting funding for, I realize, and I don't want you to give away everything. But are there any details that you can share about interesting details that these kids had that they shared that just struck you as particularly powerful?
There's several. The descriptions of how they moved, the description of how their neck actually moved or didn't move in a certain way.
Wow, how did they move?
Very.
How did that happen? How did they move, and how did their necks move?
Well, one of the witnesses interviewed at a young age was describing how, like, their necks were stiff, that they couldn't move like ours. And I'd had heard that and read that in some of the research, and I'd heard it from other people that I'd happened to run into during this filming.
I see.
And just the way they glided across the field.
I was wondering. The gliding is what I was actually wondering if that's what they were picking up on, because that is definitely something that comes up, Yeah. This gliding aspect. Yeah. So these little kids who clearly could not have known UFO research literature in Zimbabwe in 1994 are picking up on that.
Yeah. It's those little details that really further convinced me. And you see these interviews as when they're younger, and they're it's not like these children are looking at the other kids or other people looking for what to say. They're talking about something they actually saw, and that's, all throughout the interviews. It's profound. It's very impactful. I remember the first time I saw those John Mack's interviews. Yeah. Back in '94, I saw, and I was just like, wow, that is fascinating. Those kids are not lying.
Well, when you think.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you think about it, I wanted to get into John Mack's contribution here because he came down pretty early on. I think it was a couple of weeks after the event, right? And
Well, I was actually. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying, thank God he did that, because, as you were saying, these children, it was so powerful. It's, emotionally deep, emotionally touching to see these beautiful kids who are, so these obviously were good kids. It's just obvious when you see them on camera. So conscientious, so trying so hard to be honest and tell exactly what they experienced. And you can see in the eyes and in the voices of so many of them how they were affected emotionally by this event. You just, as a father of two kids, the instinct is just to pick them up and hold them and say, it's okay. What you experienced is amazing, but you're here, you're strong. I felt this protective instinct, coming over me, seeing them. And I'm sure so many millions of people felt the same way just looking at them. So, for me, case,
I think they actually wished that was the case. I think the kids wished that actually happened. That they were, really accepted and hugged and, for what they actually went through. I don't think they actually got that.
I'm sorry to hear that. Sorry to hear that, because to me, this is one of the most powerful, this is one of the most emotionally resonant UFO cases that we've had ever. Everyone hears about the Travis Walton abduction case, and that's very fascinating. It's an important case. The Betty and Barney Hill abduction case. But this particular case, this 1994 incident, to me, has more emotional impact than any of them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree.
Well, what you mentioned, I'm so sorry for talking over you. I think I might be.
No, I think I'm just
used
to a delay. So
yeah, I'm so sorry.
It's the delay on the phone a little bit.
Well, you mentioned that that the emotion, the aftermath of this, wasn't really ideal for a lot of these kids, and I feel like I'm jumping ahead a little bit. But why don't I ask you, what was it like for some of these kids in the aftermath? Was this a hard thing for them to adjust to?
Well, I think that the aftermath, they were, deluged, or if that's the right term, with media and, fascination by the media and anybody around. But they were also confronted with ridicule and just not being believed, like, oh, these kids made it up from different kids from other schools.
Right.
So they didn't really have, any comfort in acknowledging what they went through, and help in dealing with the after effects of it.
I want to return to
early
that.
On. Sure.
Well, I'm just wondering, before we're going to about 4 minutes before we come to the top of the hour for a quick break, and I wonder if you could describe how the particular event concluded itself. If we can just go back down on the ground. So the craft is down there. There's a being on the craft or near the craft. There's another being closer to the kids. How did this whole thing resolve itself? Like, how did they depart? I don't even know if I remember this part.
Well, several of the children said that they had received messages from these beings, and there were through the eye contact that was revolving around what we were doing to ourselves as a species, and it was soon after that, which that in itself is profound. But
right.
Soon after that, there was a noise that this thing made, the craft itself, or actually they couldn't locate it because it didn't seem to have a location. But that sound really scared everybody, and they went running toward the staff room where the teachers were. So nobody actually saw it. Nobody actually really saw it. There's a few that said they were, and they may have been out there, but its exit from that location was not seen by a lot of people.
So the craft made a loud noise, you're saying, that frightened the children.
Yeah.
They ran, and they didn't see the craft depart. Am I getting that right?
For the most part, I have a few witnesses who said that it did, as children. That they said that they just saw it move off at a high rate of speed.
Okay.
But for the majority did not.
Very interesting.
So it went on for 15 minutes. Whatever happened there, I mean, it's pretty agreed upon that whatever went down there, it was over a 15-minute time period. Yeah.
That's an amazingly long period of time when you think about it.
That's a long time. That's a long time.
Okay, can you imagine standing in front of a being for 15 minutes?
No, I think that's a long time. Yeah. And for me, looking at it, I think, well, I mean, I know all the events that happened in that time period, and it's still a lot longer than it should be, but interesting.
No, it's quite fascinating. So, yeah, then you mentioned that there was a kind of a telepathic type of message that some of the kids said that they received. And I do know, because this was, I think this was on the YouTube video, and I think it was in your trailer, by the way, which I want to tell people about, but that it had to do with environmental destruction. One girl said it was as if they gave me a message that we were destroying the trees and we were going to be choking to death without any air. That's the one thing I recall.
Yeah.
So this message
I think these kids weren't like primed to say any of that, from everything I gather. The things they say were just, I mean, it shocked John Mack, and it started to come out even in the early interviews, that there was a message of some sort that was communicated. I wonder, I take the interviews for what they are. And I also wonder what happens to the human being when you go through an experience like that, internally, not to,
right.
Like, do you start thinking about where you live when you have another creature from outside of our home come in? I don't know. I've thought about it in different ways to try to explain it in grounded ways, but also having met many other people that have gone through this, it's a very similar type of communication. This type of psychic communication, and it's like a mind-to-mind communication between human beings and these things.
Absolutely. Well, I want to return to that. We have a break coming right up. I just want people to know you have a trailer for this. It's at www.arielphenomenon.com, and Ariel is spelled A-R-I-E-L, arielphenomenon.com. I really encourage people to go look at this trailer. It's beautifully done. You got a lot of support from Dan Aykroyd, who's featured in it as well. And I think it's a very it's sensitively done. And really very artfully done, too. I think you did a beautiful job at shooting this from what I can see on the trailer. So I want people to go to arielphenomenon.com. You're quite welcome. Randall, can you stick around for at least one more segment while we unpack this fascinating case a little bit more? Great. I'm Richard Dolan. Thanks. This is the Richard Dolan Show. You're on KGRA Radio. We will be right back with Randall Nickerson after a couple of minutes. Stick around. I'm Richard Dolan here with Randall Nickerson, who's the director and producer of Ariel Phenomenon. This is about the September 1994 Ruwa, Zimbabwe schoolyard encounter, I guess we could say, with something really extraordinary. And actually, there's the website where the trailer can be watched is www.arielphenomenon.com. And on the site, the subtitle states, "What happens when you experience something so extraordinary that nobody believes you?" And I think that's a very apropos statement. Randall, I mean, you talked about how traumatic it was for these children to experience something and not to get that validation. That had to be really difficult for them growing up.
Yeah, I think it really depended on how their parents reacted, because that was their they were kids and they looked up to their
Right.
mom and dad, of course. And some parents were, some parents allowed them to talk about it. Some parents thought it was something else, like, demonic or, so they weren't allowed to speak about it in their home. And other children were, just, that their parents thought they had made it up. So
Amazing.
It affected them all very differently,
And you interviewed
I
so many of them.
That's true. Yeah. And even, I just remember going to this one interview and, he just didn't want to talk about it, and there's been several like that, to be honest, that they were still after all this time, after 20 years, still in a state about it, in fear, or just didn't want to go back there to think about what happened. And I've run into people also who just they have gone to religion or other things to explain it, rather than to actually just sit with what it was. And that's okay. People have to deal with how they, the best that they can deal with it, because obviously it was something that was not small in anybody's mind there, and it had a long-term effect. I mean, I haven't talked with any of the witnesses who hasn't thought about it or hasn't said to me like, yeah, it was just like it happened yesterday. It's that clear.
Did any of them ask you about the impact of John Mack himself on them and on their ability to deal with this, what you could call a traumatic event? I mean, the thing that you see about John Mack is that he's not just a UFO researcher. He was a psychologist, and he was a therapist. So he knew he had this way of dealing with these kids, of getting these young people to deal with this effect, I think on a level of emotional truth that they were not getting otherwise. And I just wonder if any of them commented on the impact that John Mack might have had on their sense of recovery, at least emotionally being able to move on from the incident.
I never really had anybody tell me that, and I never really heard that, because I think of anybody, John Mack tried to help, help them emotionally. None of the other people that interviewed them over a long period really had the kind of understanding in the heart. I mean, John Mack was a child psychoanalyst for, I think, 20 years out of his career. And so he dealt with children a lot, and he was very, very good at it. He was very skilled.
Yeah.
I mean, the man was really brilliant. If you read about his life and his accomplishments, I mean, it's just incredible that one person can get all those things done in one lifetime. So yeah, they were affected, and that's pretty common. And then, like you said, what do you do when you go through something like this and you don't have anybody to talk to? Nobody believes you, and it's a profound event. And I find that a lot, even the witnesses to the Ariel school, I mean, they just kept quiet, didn't talk to anybody, couldn't speak about it, and that does its own kind of damage, like any other trauma, and it doesn't. I just want to say, trauma doesn't mean whatever you're running into is evil or good or anything like that. It doesn't matter. It's just a new experience of something that's just beyond normal human experience. Go ahead.
Something they don't know how to process.
Yeah, something. Yeah, exactly. Something they don't know how to process, where to put it.
Yeah.
Where to, how to think about, how to carry on with your life after seeing something like that. And along the way in making, go ahead.
Well, I just want to ask you, I mean, it's a little bit, it's galling to me, and I'm sure it must be to you too, that, I mean, these kids and so many other individuals who have encountered what we would call UFOs or extraterrestrials, they are traumatized and they are unable to kind of release that trauma because they're living in a society in which the officially established truth is that this is not real. And so when they try to talk about this, they deal with the ridicule, they deal with the disbelief, but we know that actually it should not be that way, and that there is this artificial covering over the truth. It's a cover-up. There's a definite cover-up of information about this phenomenon, and it is government international policy, in my opinion. And so that this policy is itself directly related, I mean, really responsible for the trauma, in my opinion, that these children had to deal with because they were not able to process properly what they experienced because this was not supposed to be true. You know, it's galling to me.
No, I agree. And and through the process of making this film, I've met hundreds of other people that have had, encounters with these things. And, they don't talk about it. They don't have an outlet. So that's why they've come to me and come to me and shared things with me. And even in doing that, they're saying, don't tell anybody about it, but I told you that, and right. I just feel it's this hidden truth that exists, and not just one, it's all over the globe. It makes me sad because, I hope it's going to change. I think there's hope that it will change because there are a lot of really, really good, credible people who have been quiet for a long, long time. And I think they're looking for the opportunity to speak and share, and I think a lot of that, their willingness to come forward is going to be how we as a culture or as a society allow that to be okay, and not put them in sort of a bin of like, oh, he's crazy or da 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 da. No, we should hear and the importance of hearing these people out is, to me, critical because, okay, let's say that these things are out there. We should know as much as possible about what's going on because, I more definitely lean toward the fact that they are there. We should know as much as possible about them because they can have an influence on our species and on our fate.
For sure. Absolutely. For sure. And one thing about them, it's even beyond this particular case, which you're such an expert on now after having looked into it, but you find with so many encounter cases that the individuals who experience these other beings are so deeply affected. It affects them for the rest of their life. I've known a number of witnesses, some of whom are friends of mine, and they just, and like you see this all the time, they become obsessed with UFOs. They just have to talk about it all the time. And I personally know one of the witnesses in that event, a woman named Emily, who's very, very, very kind and sweet, sincere individual. Tracy and I are both friends with her. And my own observation is that, when I first met her, one thing that struck me was how hesitant she was in being open about her experience, and not because she was doubtful about what she experienced, but that she just didn't really feel comfortable with the publicity. But she was, apparently she decided to make the effort at that point, and this was only a couple of years ago. And the other thing that I noted about her is that, like so many people have had these in-depth experiences, she tried to work it out through, in her case, artwork and painting, and returning again and again to this theme. I mean, this is a very powerful thing. Her paintings are powerful, but what's powerful as well is yes, I agree. And her
work is beautiful. It's just when you see the amount of work she's she's done and the passion behind her work.
It clearly affected her
for her
deeply, very, very deeply. Like this is something that just goes right to the core of your being. And I'm wondering if you find this with any of the other individuals. In the trailer, there is a number of the people seem to be very deeply affected. There was one young man who basically talked about it like affecting his entire life, and I think his mother stated, "Oh yes, this was the most important thing for him." Can you tell me a little bit about his story?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's one of the kids. He says, if there's anything I'd want to re-experience in my life, it would be that particular day. And yeah, it just doesn't leave. It hasn't left him.
Right.
And I think another thing that happens too that I've seen is you even doubt yourself. You even doubt yourself and your experience because there is no validation from the outside world. And I saw that in him. And but yeah, very almost obsession of trying to understand it. That I see very much too is trying to be able to fit it into a box or your worldview because it's been shattered. Well, how can this be? If this is real, then this changes my world and everything I've been taught.
Can I ask you?
It's.
I want to ask you a question about this. This is something about this case that I guess I could say it bothers me, but it's not unique because a lot of UFO cases bother me, and in the sense that I have had a hard time figuring out what the motivations of these beings could have been. So, I mean, what actually, I keep wondering, like, what was going on? What were they trying to do? Why were they landing where these school children were? And by the way, I was always curious why adults were not present. I guess it was just a normal thing that you let the kids run wild during recess. But basically, why did the craft land? There were only kids there. What can we imagine was the purpose? And then the whole there's almost like a surreal. I'm not saying this was surreal, but there's almost a surreal aspect to the whole scenario. Like they land, they have an encounter, they take off. It's just all. It's almost like it's that high strangeness that follows the UFO phenomenon. And I just wonder, do you have any thoughts? Like what causes this high strangeness? Why does it happen the way that it does, in your opinion?
Well, I really don't know the actual reality, the truth to that. I've definitely speculated and thought about it a lot. And I kind of wonder, at some point in our humanity's evolution, like, is this a process that goes on? Like, the meeting, I know it because I deal with wildlife a lot, that when you first meet a wild animal out in the wild who has not seen a human being before, it's a pretty interesting situation because they literally will stare at you for a long time. And they're terrified. They'll be terrified of you initially. And it's like exposure, and the more you expose yourself to them, and not in an aggressive way, the more it's like a domestication.
I see.
With a wild animal, it's you can do it with foxes. Foxes are actually rather easy in the wild, but it's that I think about that, and I think about, well, is this what this is about? Just sort of a gradual saying, look, we're here, just think about it for a while and we're going to go away. You know what I mean? I mean, just on a simple level, I wonder about, is this some kind of, a slow, almost domestication program of something that's out there that doesn't want to scare the hell out of us in a big way, but wants to subtly allow us to acclimatize ourselves to the fact that they are there. That's my theory. I don't know if that's true, but I wonder a lot about that because of the way a lot of these incidents happen. It's just, I'm constantly wondering about that. What is it about? What is it about? And the why?
Well, it could be
and
that it could be that we have as easy a time understanding them as a fox does understanding us. It really could be.
Right.
Maybe that's one reason why these encounters really don't make sense according to like a normal human logic. Like, back in the 50s, when this phenomenon was kind of a new thing that was being discussed, people would commonly speculate, well, maybe they've just arrived, they're doing surveillance in preparation for something, whether they're going to take over or establish relations or something, but all in ways that were comprehensible to, the people of the time. But this phenomenon doesn't act in a way that's comprehensible. And this is the thing that I always find to be frustrating, because when I try to work out what their motivations are, I have a very difficult time trying to come to grips with why they do the things they do. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. On the other hand, we're left with an event in this case that is so incredibly well attested to that I don't think that there's any debunking of this case that really has ever amounted to anything. Are you aware? I mean, I don't know of anyone who's actually set out and said the Rua case was total nonsense and here's why. Like, I'm not aware of that. Are you aware of anything like that?
Well, they're not really in the broad sense. But initially, I did hear about like a Russian Russian satellite rocket body that entered over Africa.
Oh my God, the Russian rocket re-entry again? How many times
right.
do we have to hear the Russian rocket re-entry as the explanation for a UFO event? It's like every time they just trot that out.
Well, that's interesting. You've heard that before?
Oh my God, too many times. Too many.
Really? Okay. Well, I took it very seriously in the beginning, and as far as I'm concerned, it could have happened. It could have been a Russian rocket reentry, but it wouldn't explain the other witnesses. These are adult witnesses having nothing to do with the school, the playground whatsoever, that reported other things during the morning, during the daytime, during the evening,
really?
on the following. Yeah, there was a lot of witnesses to something really strange for several days. I mean, even the BBC reporter who I interviewed, who covered it initially, he was like, this went on for a while.
What exactly happened?
One event. As far as what?
What were some of the other strange things that people were reporting?
Well, there's another school actually very close to 50 kilometers away from Ariel, where this was also in the morning, but I believe it was on the Thursday, the day before Ariel. But there's two schools that were also reported this thing. None of the creatures, but this craft flying low to the ground, changing directions, and like one report, I'll just speak about one at the Chimanani school, and it's about 50 kilometers away from Ariel, and they saw this thing come across the ground. It was very low to the ground, and it was very large, and it looked like it was looking for somewhere to land. And there was a lot of witnesses to that. There was only two that I spoke to, and they were native of Zimbabwe. So the way they described it, I just find fascinating. They described it as a big rock, and I kept asking him, what do you mean a rock? And he held his hands out and finally got to the word oval shaped rock. But there was just a language barrier between him and I and the other person he was with who saw it. But there are several stories. There was a farmer in the morning of the Ariel event who was up early that morning, and she saw this thing with a round top and a flat bottom out by her chicken run, out by the barn.
Oh, wow.
And she had never seen anything like it. And actually, she was interviewed, by the BBC at the time. Nobody's really seen that either. But yeah, it's not just there. There were other people, including pilots, that were witnesses on the day before or the night before.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, anytime I hear any one explanation of that, and then you get to the kids, say, okay, that they were influenced by this rocket reentry or something. I just can't see it. I mean, it's just
it's ridiculous. It's absurd.
It is.
You've got these kids. They're standing within touching distance, I believe, of one of the beings. I mean, I think they were that close. That's not a rocket reentry. It's absolutely ridiculous. But there are people who just they're insistent on explaining this away in any way possible.
It was Kecksburg, Richard, where I'd heard that rocket reentry before. Yeah. Kecksburg case.
Kecksburg, there's a lot of others as well. But Kecksburg definitely comes to mind. Yeah, there were others.
Yeah, it's just, how do you get from something in the sky to a report that is so detailed, so specific, and from children that don't know? I mean, even the color of the outfits or whatever these creatures were in, that it was black.
Yeah.
I mean, even in the media, that was not common. Matter of fact, it was in your book. It was in one of your books that I did research about who have seen creatures in black. There's not many, actually.
No,
and
very few.
One took place in Africa. Yeah. And so if you're going to make up a story, which there's just no evidence that is true for this case, I just don't see it. It's just not there in the interviews. It's just not there. But if you're going to make up a story, you'd go by certain things you've heard. And there are so many things in this case that are just, they're just
right.
You can't know about it.
No, I fully agree.
Known about it.
Hey, Randall, I'm at the bottom of the hour here. We got to take another quick break.
Sure.
I'm wondering if you're good for one more segment, because I still have like a bunch of follow-up questions. And this is, to me, just one of the most fascinating conversations I've had in so long. So thank you for sticking around. We're going to be back for one more segment then. I am Richard Dolan, having a great time with Randall Nickerson, who is the producer and director of Ariel Phenomenon. And please go to www.arielphenomenon.com. That's Ariel with an E-L, A-R-I-E-L, phenomenon.com. And I want to talk a little bit about the documentary itself and your interaction with Dan Aykroyd as well. But first, let's take a very quick break. I'm Richard Dolan here on KGRA. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm Richard Dolan here with Randall Nickerson. And we're having a really interesting conversation about the 1994 Ruwa, Zimbabwe schoolyard UFO encounter. One of the most emotionally powerful UFO events, I think, ever. And one that's been fortunate to receive the treatment of by people like the late Dr. John Mack, but also by Randall, who has taken the time to interview these witnesses in their adult years now, after 2 decades, to reflect on what they experienced and to put this down in the form of a documentary. And Randall, how's it going? You've shot it all and you're doing post-production, but I guess you guys need some money to keep going. Is that the story?
Well, that's been the story. That's been the story the whole trip. Boy, if I had any idea how much it actually costs to make a good movie, I mean, not just a movie, but something that can last through the ages and something that actually means something, I don't know if I would have started, because, boy, you have to get good people, and that's not cheap in the film industry. But yeah, it's been, I've been doing this, it'll be 10 years, which is, that's a little above average as far as independent documentary being done, but generally anything, you put that much time into is going to be good. And I feel really proud that it tells the story truthfully, that it reflects the feelings of the people involved, and a message, or not a message, but just I guess a question for all of us on this planet of what does something like this mean, and
right.
to us and our worldview. And I don't know. I think about it a lot when I'm under a telescope looking up at the stars or Saturn, and think about, my God, we're so small and so in this enormous place. It's very humbling, and most people, I don't think, often think about it.
I fully agree. I think I think ancient people, at least my take on ancient human society, I think they were much closer to this idea because they tended to see the world as dominated by, let's say, the gods, or forces beyond their control. And people, I think, were a little bit less inclined to see themselves as the masters of the world. I mean, I think they realized that there were definite limits to what the place of a human being was in this world. But as we've moved further and further into our era, especially with the power of scientific thinking, I mean, it's definitely true that people just assume we're at the top of the food chain. And not only that, but we've got everything figured out. So there's not this sense of mystery, much less a vulnerability that I think really comes out when we start contemplating this phenomenon and these beings that are associated with it. It sounds like you agree.
I agree. I think, we do. I mean, I just think in Manhattan, you can barely see the stars in downtown Manhattan when you look up at the sky. But in Africa, I mean, when I spent about a year and 3 months over there, and there's people, that's what they do. I mean, they sit on the porch and there's no electricity, and they look at the night sky every night. And it's perfectly clear and black, and it's just like, it's profound.
What's cool about your Ariel Phenomenon page, I'm looking right at it. So it's got, it's a trailer for the movie, but it's set in front of a screen of the stars. It's a black sky with stars. That's how you set it up.
Yeah, those are actually galaxies that were taken from the Hubble. It's the deep field image, those are all galaxies in a very small sliver of the sky. It's just incredible.
Oh my God, that is so fantastic! I love that. I didn't know.
Every galaxy has 300 billion stars, or some more, some less. But I mean, it's just the enormity of where we are in the universe is just stunning.
Well, it's incredible because, like, right this moment, as I'm speaking with you and everyone's listening, I'm looking at a large number of these galaxies, which you put on the website, and it's actually kind of powerful for me to have this experience with you as we're talking about this event. And you had the wisdom to put this beautiful image. I didn't even realize it was each of those dots was a galaxy. So that's incredible. What that represents.
I'm glad you recognized it. I was like, I hope somebody gets this.
It's very powerful.
Like, what image that is? Oh, that's great.
Yeah, very powerful. No, this is a humbling phenomenon. I mean, I've been thinking about this quite a bit myself just lately, what the UFO phenomenon means in terms of even our personal transformation. It's had a lot to do with my own personal transformation, having been involved in it for now 25 years, studying it, and it's just ripped open my worldview more times than I can recall, to be honest with you. And it's just forced me not just to reevaluate myself in the world, but myself at a much deeper level. Like, what does it mean? What am I? And once you start reevaluating the world, you start reevaluating yourself. And so for me, UFOs is like a crowbar to pry open my previous worldviews. It's been very transformative, and it is powerful. It's a lot more than simply asking, what are these technology of these spaceships that these aliens are flying? There's really profound questions that arise with this subject, and I feel like you're dealing with them in this documentary. That's certainly how it feels to me. That there's an emotional level and an intellectual level with these issues, and so I hope this gets finished sometime soon. And how did Dan Aykroyd get involved in it, by the way?
Well, in the massive recovery of all any archival that was shot at the time, or with John Mack or anybody in the film, I found out that Dan had interviewed John Mack, and it never aired. And so I got a hold. Actually, it was my associate producer, Ann. She's wonderful. She got in touch with Dan Aykroyd and asked him if we could see that footage, which he sent us. He was brilliant. And I asked him also, or had Ann ask him, just could we do an interview? And he agreed. And in the process of just interviewing him about John Mack, he just really, I think, understood the effort and the importance of this case, that he did like a promo for the film, and it was just it was really, I was really touched. I left that I just felt like he is a really, really big-hearted man. He's just got a really big heart, and I'd known him from movies or seen him in movies and stuff, but I was just really, really impressed by him and his the way he gave that interview, and his openness and willingness to help.
Yes, this is in the promo. This is in the promo or the trailer, and I fully agree. He's very articulate, very sensitive. He's deep.
He is.
It's just really nice to see this. He speaks very deeply about this experience that these young children had, and there's a lot of heart. It's actually really, it's actually, I have to tell you, the promo itself really strikes at one's heartstrings. There's a deep emotional quality to this. There's not, there aren't many, I should say. There are a few. There aren't many UFO-oriented documentaries that go to the level that at least yours seems to go, at least judging by the promo.
Yeah.
And so for that
true.
reason, I'm glad. I want Ariel Phenomenon out. So I'm hoping, like, if people want to contribute, and this is a shameless promotion, but I really want to do this. If they want to contribute to making this a success, how should they go to arielphenomenon.com, or should they go somewhere else? What's the best strategy for people?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Ariel Phenomenon, we've been getting donations on the website, which has definitely been helpful for sure. And, larger donations, we were waiting for that phone to ring, because it was about a month ago that we came to a halt. So it's just me working on it again. I mean, I can't tell you how many times that's happened, where it's, you just run out of resources, and then it's back to me working on it, which is just not fast enough.
Fun times. I'm sure that's the most fun.
Well, yeah, because I got to work too, and then, which is, it's the enormity of it. It's not a small project. I mean, there's a lot to. It's a featured doc. It's at a certain level that it's. There's just so many hats I have to wear and things that need to be done, and I'm not complaining. I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't believe in the story 100%.
This is it's more than a labor of love. This is a labor for posterity. And this case, the more that I think about it, it's in the very short list of some of the most significant encounter cases ever recorded, in my opinion, because of the number. I mean, it's children, so someone might say, well, it's just kids, they can't be relied upon. But no, the oldest witness was 12 years old, and we all know 12-year-olds are able to make a determination, but even a 7-8-year-old child is able to know what they're experiencing, and what you.
It's a consistency. It's a consistency
exactly. You got
of all
these
those people too.
It's a powerful case, and potentially to have the kind of treatment that you're giving it, I think is going to be a really great service to not just the field of ufology, but really the world. This is something that has the ability, I think, to change the game. I'm really hoping.
I'm hoping so too. I feel, I feel, I could have finished this film a long time ago at a lower level, but I realized very, very soon on that this story I wanted to make a piece of history, a piece for history.
Right.
And to do it right, to actually tell the story, to research the story, to double check everything, to just make it, what do you call it? the official, the story as it is, with every detail that I can get into it. I think the important part, like, of this whole phenomena is that, hey, I think of Emily, I think of all the other witnesses, like, these are human beings, these are good people, beautiful people, smart people, beautiful hearts. And
yes,
so they went through something that we can't explain, that I want those people to be able to not feel like they have to be quiet, or, not feel like they've been, I want them to feel like they've been heard and they've been seen by their fellow man, that, yes, okay. I mean, because it allows you to carry on into, with your life in a sort of a way. It's like it's healing when somebody hears you and listens to you. Even with something like this, and particularly something like this, because you don't know what to do with it. But I mean, that's been the goal, is really to almost be, I hate to say this because it's not, I don't want to offend anybody, but in a way, it's like a Me Too movement for people that have gone through these experiences.
No, it's not being too far at all. I think you're right on target. I think you're right on target.
And there's a lot of people that I know, that I run into all the time, that have nowhere to go and have they do not talk about it. And I always think about, God, if all these people that have kept quiet all of a sudden all came out at once, we would not be having these discussions about, whether this is real or not,
No, that's right.
It's those people I would love to have come forward, because, pilots, whatever professions they are in, there's some pretty major people that have had close encounters with these things, and they're just not talking. So, yeah, I'm sure you've had the same experience.
Absolutely, I have. And I think anyone who's been involved in, and not even at a profession level, I just think anyone who's been involved even at an interest level in this subject long enough, that you run into many other people who quietly have had these experiences, and they don't know where to go, just as you say. And I think it does really bad things to people and to societies, because it's like you have this, for most people, it's the most extraordinary experience of their life, most incredible experience that they've ever had in their whole life. And then what happens to it? If they don't know how to process it, they forget it. They just put it in a little corner of their mind, and it's walled in, and they never experience it again, or they never think about it, or they think about it and it's very stressful. And that can't be good. That cannot be good for people.
No.
And it's not good for societies either. It forces people to live in a kind of denial. And also, you end up not trusting yourself. You end up not trusting your senses, and you end up not trusting your judgment. So it's unhealthy in every way. Yeah.
And even on a larger scale, I think it stops a natural evolution. By denying something that a lot of people are experiencing, it's stifling our evolution as a species. This may be a normal process that we're supposed to go through, which is what happens in the wild. You run into a higher order creature, and how do you deal with them? And there's this whole process that I wonder, if we were all, informed about this, how would it alter our civilization and the way we view our own worlds and our culture and space? I mean, I think if we actually understood or opened ourselves up to the fact that there very well may be something out there, we probably would be doing a lot more in space. And there would probably be a much bigger drive there to, for discovery alone. Yeah. Anyway,
I think it's very well said.
But thanks.
Very well said. Totally agree. I mean, it's
thought-provoking.
Right? It's like our future is being held hostage. Is sometimes how I think of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe that this is just naturally done. This is an artificial block that's being thrown in our way, and I would say it's an artificial block thrown down by the hierarchy of human society. I think they ultimately are the ones making the decision to keep this silent and hidden from the rest of us. These other beings, I mean, I wonder how much they're able to communicate with us. I really do wonder. Like, how much could you communicate with a fox, for example? How much could they communicate with us? In fact, when I met you, you and I met about 5 years ago, and it was there that I met another gentleman who'd had abduction experiences, and I found him very, very credible. And one thing he said to me, and I wonder if this resonates with you, he said his feeling of when he was with these other beings was that they had to painfully slow their own thinking process down in order to relate to him. This is actually what he said to me. He also indicated that they had what he believed was a kind of like a hive-oriented mind, which I thought was quite interesting. But he just said to me that they had to slow down. And at least that was his impression. I don't really know how confident he was about it, but that's what he believed. Does that make any sense to you? Does that sound like what we might be dealing with?
I mean, I think, again, I kind of compare everything to what I experience in nature, and it's, I mean, there's when you're around another creature, a baboon or whatever, and I spent some time doing that in Africa, and I mean, you have to kind of come down to their level, and certain things that they understand that I maybe understand on a far greater level. It doesn't matter. It's what can we both relate to in common, even though we're gaps apart as far as intellectual power. But I find that a lot, and it's actually helped me in this process. I know I keep bringing up the wildlife thing, but it really helps me grounds my understanding of what could be going on here by observing nature and how nature relates to me. Who am I? I mean, in a sense, when I go out into a really wild place where there's not a lot of people aren't seen. I'm essentially an alien person. I'm an alien to them.
No, it strikes me as a quite relevant observation, actually. The wildlife analogy strikes me as quite germane, as quite relevant. It makes sense to me. Where the wildlife in this case,
right?
And these other things are. I mean, that's really what it is, and I do think like we really struggle to understand what they are, but the value that you've done here and that you are doing, and I want people to go to arielphenomenon.com, watch the trailer, and help you out, help you finish this really important documentary dealing with one of the most important UFO encounter cases in the history of the phenomenon, as far as anyone's been able to record. It's very powerful, and
I appreciate the plug. I appreciate the plug.
Well, thank you.
I'm not good at asking. I'm kind of the person that just keeps plugging away till I get something done. And
good.
But it has been a struggle, but.
This is the kind of thing that people need to be supporting. Like, this is what Patreon's supposed to be for, right? They should be your patron. And I think that this is a really amazing cause. And all they have to do is watch the promo. It's powerful. And I think they'll see that you've really done your work on this. And again, it's important not simply for us to learn about this phenomenon, for people to know what this important case was and what it means for us. But I think, again, any great story is only great when it has emotional power, and this is one such story. It has emotional power that I think everyone can relate to. And I'm going to add, when I was watching it, I saw it twice today with Tracy, and And we both felt emotional. I think she felt particularly emotional, but I did too. And the thing is, like, I ask, well, why? Why do we feel emotional? And I think because this story speaks to a very deep truth. And what's powerful is when good people, honest, sincere people, gentle people are struggling to comprehend a truth that they're almost not permitted to comprehend. And so for those many, many millions of people in this world who have had profound experiences, and they watch that promo and they watch this movie, they see themselves in what you've done. And I think it's cathartic, to be honest, for people to see this. And I think I guarantee you when this documentary airs, I absolutely believe there'll be a lot of wet faces in the audience. I firmly believe that, because it strikes at a very deep level of meaning and personal pain and suffering that many experiencers have had and have been unable to release because of the way that our society is currently. Hopefully will change.
Well, I've had that experience in doing screenings of the rough cut. The emotional, the tears in the audience. Yeah. It's definitely been, it definitely hits people. And, so, I think, we were scheduled to get it done by this month, March. But we're in a great place, just still a few months away.
Okay.
But yeah, this has been the way it is. It's good, and then everything stops. Yeah.
Hey, listen, I know what it's like to have people wait for projects that I'm working on. So you got my sympathy. I'm there every day. I know what it's like. But anyway, I would just, if I could offer any advice, I would say, do your best. Don't rush. Get it done when it's ready, and that's the end of it. And the world will be grateful when it's done, and that's all you have to worry about. But we're out of time. We're at the top of the hour, Randall.
It's been a pleasure, Richard. I really appreciate it, and I just enjoy speaking with you because you're a big thinker, and I enjoy the work that you've done, and I've read your books, and I just think this guy's he's got it right. He's looking at it the right way.
That's an honor to hear that coming from you. I really appreciate that. And again, if people need to reach you, should they go to arielphenomenon.com, or is there a better place for them to go to?
No, that's pretty much where everything generates out of. We're on Facebook, Twitter, everything else. But if you go to arielphenomenon.com, it'll take you wherever.
Yeah,
there's actually 2 trailers on the site, and just a lot more information about the case and everybody that's been working on it. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I want to thank you, Randall, for coming out. It's Randall Nickerson, the producer and director of Ariel Phenomenon, about the 1994 Ruwa, Zimbabwe UFO case. An amazing case, and soon to be an amazing documentary. Absolutely, it was a pleasure. And with that, it is time.
Can I say one word?
Jump in.
Just want to put out a great thanks to the witnesses who've put so much of their lives out, and I just want to say thank you to them and all the people that have helped. I couldn't have done this alone, and I really appreciate that.
Absolutely, and I'm glad that you got the opportunity to say that. And it is now time for me and we to say goodnight. I want to thank my producer, Race Hobbs, the good people in the chat room, and you on the other end of the connection. I'm Richard Dolan, looking forward to the next time. Now, stay tuned for 3 hours of Fade to Black with Jimmy Church. And remember, while we learn and grow and search for the truth in all that we do, let's be kind to each other. Good night.